Hello everyone, how you doing today? My name is Adrian Lloyd and welcome back to the channel. This is just my stupid opinion. I'm just coming today with a few things that I wanted to address, just as I was kind of doing, just reading through the news and stuff today. I just, a couple stories that kind of stood out to me. Just give me 1 second. I just want to make sure that everything is good in volume-wise and for the stream and all that. Just going to quickly check it on my phone, and then we'll get right into it. Be all of 1 minute. Alright, seems to be looking good so far. Alright, awesome. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about today was actually which kind of started, what was sort of the main thing I was going to come on the stream about, and I found a couple other things that I was interested in. Actually had more to do with what I've named the stream after. And it's this coming from, I found it on the National News Watch. But it's talking about Tory government cancels $100 million school repair fund. Now, this is talking about the Ontario provincial government, Doug Ford's government. And, I found this was kind of an interesting choice, because we all knew that there was going to be cuts that were coming into when Doug Ford came in. But, we a lot of people who voted for Doug Ford, they kind of expected that there would be certain things that he's not going to touch. There would be certain things that, regardless, he would still go ahead with the programs. So this really caught my attention. And of course, this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to be pointing at when they're talking about Doug Ford's government. So it's worth bringing up. So I started kind of reading through it. And so as this goes on to say, it actually originally from the Canadian Press. And it says, Ontario's new Tory government has canceled a $100 million fund earmarked for school repairs this year, a cut that comes as a result of Doug Ford's campaign promise to scrap the province's cap and trade system. Yeah, that's true, and this is also focusing on sort of the idea of greenhouse gas emissions, like the cap and trade and carbon tax. School board were notified on July 3rd that the greenhouse gas reduction fund would be eliminated, and that only work contracted on or before the date would be covered. The memo obtained by the Canadian Press advises school boards to stop spending the cash that was allocated in April immediately. So it sounds pretty severe off the start, It's like, well, there's already going to be some that are already underway, so we don't have to worry about that. But then we're getting into the important parts that's over here. Toronto District School Board Chair Robin Pilkey said that the move is disappointing because that board has a $4 billion repair backlog. Now that is coming just from the Toronto District School Board. And that's an impressive amount to have backlogged in repairs, which is sort of goes on to show like the conditions of our schools right now, which that was not something that came under the Doug Ford government. That is actually something that's been around for a while. I remember that even in the schools that I went to, the public schools that I went to, were always having this problem. My elementary school, there was, I remember breaking a badminton racket was a big deal because they weren't sure if they could replace it. And all the subsequent schools that I went to after, when I thought that they were supposed to be the rich school, they had the exact same problem. My middle school, which was just grades 7 to 8, they ended up having similar issues that they couldn't really replace stuff. And then when I went into my high school, which I thought was supposed to be the rich school, or like the school that actually had funding, it was a lot of the same same stuff. It was just no matter little things would break down, and then the schools could never repair it. So this, first of all, this is just, of course, it comes from lack of government funding, without a doubt. That is always a problem. But also, I think it's the way the schools spend their money is also part of the problem. So that's not completely always going to be the government's fault. They give the funds, but then the school's not spending the funds appropriately. Then, well, you can't really expect much to get done. As we move on, it says the Toronto District School Board has budgeted $300 million for upkeep this fiscal year, including the $25 million it was awarded specifically from this fund, and now faces difficult choices, Pilkey said. The board had planned to use the funding to repair windows, lighting, and complete other mechanical works in its schools, she said. And it says, total, the province has approximately $15 billion of repairs backlog in its 4,900 public funded schools. That is a lot, and it shows the condition of Canadian schools right now, or at least Ontario schools. For one of the provinces, I mean, we do receive our equalization payments a little bit. Kind of depends, I think, from year to year. But for one of the biggest provinces, this sort of shows the condition that we're in. And it's not just this that we have this problem, actually, because another industry that we have a lot of, we're not doing pretty well on, it actually has to do with retirement homes and care facilities for elderly people. It was a report that was released, I think it was last month. It was a mini documentary series where it was talking about that when they were looking into the state of Canadian retirement homes, Canadian old care facilities, that they ranked them from 1 out of 10, and 1 meant that it had to shut down, and so 2 was about the most limited one you can have. And they said they gave 2s and 3s throughout all of Canada. The highest Canada ever got when one of these facilities was a 3. So that's not looking too good for us. But the main thing that had me looking into this was because I was like, okay, it seems like a lot of money in order for Doug Ford and his government to be sort of scrapping, and especially when we're talking about schools, that's not going to sit well with pretty much anyone. Nobody likes to have their school, their child's school go looking like a rundown facility. And I found it very difficult to believe that Doug Ford would scrap this money, especially when they say it's meant for school repair funds. Well, this is where things got a little bit interesting to me when I actually went looking for the greenhouse gas reduction fund. So here it is right here, and it's not very long. It's only 4 pages. So, you can take for anybody can really go through and take a look at this. And it's dated for January 10th, 2018. And as we can see here, we're all good. As we can see here, this memorandum serves to remind school boards of upcoming reporting deadlines for the following programs: Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, Community Hubs Capital Funding, Minor Retrofits and Accessibility, and School Renewal Allocation, SRA, Capitalization Expenditure. Excuse me, that cold still is just hanging on a little bit, and my smoking habit is really not helping out with that. That's on me, though. So here's where things got a little bit interesting when I was looking for it. So we have here right off the start, we're looking at the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And as known in Memorandum 2017, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a time-limited funding program that is aimed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from facilities in the education sector. So right there, it's telling you that it has to do with cap and trade, has to do with carbon tax, anything to do with greenhouse gas emissions, essentially. So that's a little bit interesting when they're talking about repairs all of a sudden for their schools, doesn't it? Because if that's all it's really limiting itself to, if the whole program is aimed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, then what does that have to do with school repair? And things got a little bit more interesting when I started looking a little more into it. So just going through some basic, and here we go. We're talking about eligible expenditures to repair, replace, and install building systems that have a proven impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Eligible components must be listed in the Memorandum 2017 or be pre-approved by the ministry, otherwise expenses will not be reimbursed. And then right below it, these funds are not intended to fund operational or maintenance expenses. Now that is very interesting, because especially that part, the maintenance expenses, because if we remember, we just take a look back here and what it's talking about. It says, where is it? The board had planned to use the funding to repair windows, lighting, and complete other mechanical works in its schools. That came from the spokesperson, Robin Pilkey. So that doesn't, number one, something like lights, that actually can be something that could be used if you're talking about changing out the lights for something that would be considered a little more energy efficient. That is something that you can do in order to lower these greenhouse gas emissions as they're talking about. But they're also talking about repairing windows and other mechanical works in the school, when explicitly it says here that it is not to fund operational or maintenance expenses. It also says it does not support new construction or facility enhancements that expand the gross floor area of the facility or the original intended use for this facility, cover salaries or wages of the school board, or service the debt. See, that part is very interesting to me, because when we're talking about that, then we're talking about, especially the maintenance expenses, then a lot of the things that they're talking about, a lot of these repairs that they want to do, they wouldn't be eligible in the first place. But they're also talking about how it would be a $100 million school repair and how much they have backlogged in that time. So this, I think, really pokes a hole in this whole idea, because if it's just about what to do for the greenhouse gas emissions, then most of the things that they're talking about, most of the money that would come for these repairs that they're complaining about that they're not going to have the funding for, it actually would not apply to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Probably more what would make reference to would be community hubs capital funding, the minor retrofits and accessibility expenditures. School boards have been allocated $100 million to retrofit available school space for the community partners and improve the accessibility to the schools enabled by the community partners. So that is probably where they're actually making reference. I actually think when they're doing this, they're conflating the two. They're conflating this Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund with the Community Hubs Capital Funding minor retrofits and accessibility expenditures. But what Doug Ford and his government so far as I know, are only taking out number one. So that becomes... So this whole idea that they're trying to present as if he's really not allowing schools to make these repairs is not exactly true. But instead, what they are doing is just taking out this BS sort of greenhouse gas reduction fund. So that is important, worth noting when we're discussing this whole this story right here. But they don't really bring that up as far as I could see from the whole idea. And then there have the school boards complaining against Doug Ford and what he wants to do. Well, first of all, a lot of these repairs that they're talking about, the amount that they have to do. For instance, the Toronto District School Board has $4 billion in repair backlog. That is pretty horrible for the school board. Now, of course, this is not one specific school, but it has to do with a number of schools across the Toronto area. But if you were $4 billion backlogged in repairs, then that, it seems to me, has to do more with the school board itself, that they have not been allocating the funds properly in order to get these repairs done. And I'd hate to know what sort of conditions these schools are in at the moment, if that's the how much money they have backlogged. And then they also say the province has approximately $15 billion repair and backlogs of its 4,900 publicly funded schools, and that's across the province. Once again, this has to probably do with school boards being inefficient at their jobs than anything else. So I saw that, I read through this, and I just thought it was very interesting that they were sort of presenting as if the whole amount of money was being taken out. When, as far as I can tell, that is not the case whatsoever, because this whole memorandum here is covering a few different things. This memorandum serves to remind schools boards upcoming reporting deadlines for the following programs. Multiple programs, not a single program. And it didn't say that they were taking out this whole thing. They were just saying they were taking out number 1, which is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, but it is number 2, Community Hubs Capital Funding, that actually has the majority of the money for the school repairs that they need. So I just wanted to sort of talk about that a little bit. Then there were a couple other things that I saw during my time there. There was a couple other things I saw when I was looking through the news today. And this is another one. The federal immigration minister criticized Ontario Tories' language on asylum seekers. We know from experience that whenever any population is demonized or belittled, it affects public opinion. And I take it that's a quote by Ahmed Hussein, the federal minister on immigration, refugee, and citizenship. So if, it must be pretty bad if Ahmed, what's his name again? Ahmed Hussein. If Ahmed Hussein is talking about how they're demonizing and belittling the people on these asylum seekers, it must be pretty bad in what the Tories ended up saying about it. What did they end up saying? The federal minister of immigration objected Monday to the new Ontario Tory government referencing to people claiming refugee status as illegal border crossers. Last week, a spokesperson for Premier Doug Ford used the term in a statement sent to the media, saying the recent influx of asylum seekers has resulted in a housing crisis in Toronto and threats to services that Ontario families depend on. On Monday, an email statement sent to the Canadian press from Ford's office repeated the illegal border crossers terminology. So that is what they're so offended about, calling them illegal border crossers, when that's exactly what they are. And the thing is, too, is when they're talking about this, Doug Ford is not wrong in a lot of things that he's talking about here, because he says resulted in housing crisis in Toronto. Well, we suddenly have a huge influx of people. A lot of them are going to Toronto right now, because that's always been where a lot of new arrivals are sent to. They're always sent to Toronto. Right now, we have a number of people that are being housed in college dorms, and I believe it is about a month from today, August 9th, when they eventually get kicked out, because students returning to the colleges and universities will have to take up residence again. So where are these people going to go? They don't have homes for them. These people are either going to have to already go in the they're going to have to go into the homeless shelters, which are already past capacity, not at capacity, past. They have a crisis of their own on the go right now. And then we're going to send even more people there. Now, there are hundreds of people that are being housed on here. I think upwards of 96 families they're talking about that are being housed in these college dorms. So where are they supposed to go? A number of them will probably end up on the street because of this, which is just going to go to the rising Toronto crime that is going on right now if you have more people that are going on the street. So it's really not helping anyone, and this has been because Justin Trudeau and his government has done next to nothing to help stem the amount of people coming across the border, and also hasn't done much to get these people settled if they are going to stay here. On top of this, we have very few jobs that have been created over since 2018. We probably have had about half of the jobs, I think we're underneath 100,000 jobs or so that have been created in 2018. And we have tens of thousands of immigrants that have crossed our border now. Illegal immigrants. Yes, illegal border crossers. I said it. I know I must be belittling them. But if this is what they're going to get offended about, which they're just finding anything really to get offended about, then just brings me, it made me think of an old George Carlin skit that I had seen a long time ago. And I think it would be perfect to, actually, I want to pull it up for you. I did pull it up, I should say. And let's just let our good old man, George Carlin, say it as it is.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. And it gets worse with every generation. For some reason, it just keeps getting worse. I'll give you an example of that. There's a condition in combat. Most people know about it. It's when a fighting person's nervous system has been stressed to its absolute peak and maximum, can't take any more input. The nervous system has either snapped or is about to snap. In the First World War, that condition was called shell shock. Simple, honest, direct language. 2 syllables. Shell shock. Almost sounds like the guns themselves. That was 70 years ago. Then a whole generation went by, and the Second World War came along, and the very same combat condition was called battle fatigue. 4 syllables now. Takes a little longer to say. Doesn't seem to hurt as much. Fatigue is a nicer word than shock. Shell shock. Battle fatigue. Then we had the war in Korea, 1950. Madison Avenue was riding high by that time, and the very same combat condition was called operational exhaustion. Hey, we're up to 8 syllables now. And the humanity has been squeezed completely out of the phrase. It's totally sterile now. Operational exhaustion. Sounds like something that might happen to your car. Then, of course, came the war in Vietnam, which has only been over for about 16 or 17 years. And thanks to the lies and deceit surrounding that war, I guess it's no surprise that the very same condition was called post-traumatic stress disorder. Still 8 syllables, but we've added a hyphen. And the pain is completely buried under jargon. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll bet you if we'd have still been calling it shell shock, some of those Vietnam veterans might have gotten the attention they needed at the time. I'll bet you that.
I think that is still very relevant in today's world as well. And the thing is, too, is we've done the same thing when we're talking about this crisis right here. There was a time that we called it illegal migration. Now we have changed the term underneath Justin Trudeau's government to irregular migration, and we've done the exact same thing. We've taken it from 6 syllables to 7 syllables. It's this is why I love George Carlin, and actually I try and listen to George Carlin's stand-up at least once a year, and not just for the laughs, but also just to sort of think the same way. George Carlin was was a great free thinker, and I think a lot of his stuff that he says is still relevant today, and this is another one we've done with it. But right now, when it comes to our current government, the Liberal government right now, they play the game of offended. Anything that they can accuse the opposition of being offensive over, they will do so, which is actually brings us in right into, wow, I didn't even expect that, but it brings us right into the third and final story I wanted to talk about right now. And you know what? It's just as dumb. Coming from both sides, it's just as dumb. Cabinet ministers, MPs, spar over who gets to call themselves feminists. Debate erupted after Conservative MPs said Liberals act like they own the definition of feminism. Now, I believe this was Conservative MP Rachel Harder, which she's not exactly wrong when she says that, as the liberals and left wing do like to think they own the definition of feminism. But the fact that we have people in the House of Commons arguing over the word feminism is just ridiculous. Can we, in this day and age, the idea of fighting over the term is just, it kind of to me shows how far out there a lot of our disconnected a lot of our MPs are. A lot of our people, our politicians, even the ones that are more connected, still still are too far disconnected from the rest of us, because they don't really seem to, at least because a lot of these conservatives are arguing over the fact, well, we're called feminists too. We are feminists too. Well, why are you even arguing with a dead term these days? It's kind of like liberal these days. It's just been completely dead and destroyed. It was dragged through the muck by all the left-wing progressives, and like the whole idea of liberalism was just dragged through the muck by these people, that there's no reason in even defending the term anymore. Which is why a lot of my long-term viewers would realize that when I first started my podcast, I kind of tried to still consider myself a classic liberal, that was sort of thing. Since then, I've just abandoned the term because there's no reason to it, and actually these days I try not to label myself too much on the political spectrum, just because I don't really see a point anymore. But it's the same sort of thing with feminists. It's been completely destroyed. The idea of feminism and what the original feminists were fighting for has been completely destroyed and torn down by everything that's happened over the last few decades. Even a lot of the what were considered good second wave feminists are being completely disowned by the modern third wave feminism, and I don't know, I think there's like a fourth wave feminism coming up. So it's just, what's the point? What's even the fucking point of fighting over it these days? But as this article goes on to say from the CBC, it says, some Liberal cabinet ministers and Conservative MPs are sparring over who gets to call themselves a feminist. After a profile piece on Alberta MP Rachel Harder was published in the Globe and Mail, including comments from her suggesting that Liberals act like they own the definition of feminism, two female members of cabinet took to Twitter to defend their party. I have a good idea who those two were. Federal Employment Minister Patty Hajdu called out the Conservative MP for anti-abortion views, calling her comments a failure to understand the woman's reproductive choice are core to feminism. Which, first of all, I just want to say, too, that when talking about Patty Hajdu, she was, I saw something today by her that was absolutely ridiculous, which was on Twitter. She had taken a screenshot of her parody account, which was called Fatty Hajdu, and her comment on it was that using the term fat or fatty has been commonly used to keep women down in their place, which is absolutely ridiculous, because as I end up replying to her, it's just the term fat or fatty has just been used as a simple way to get under people's skin, and it's not restricted to one side. Both men and women get called fat or fatty plenty of times, and it is not simply a term that is used against women to make her seem like she's less than a person or anything like that. Is absolutely ridiculous. In fact, I would actually argue the opposite and say I hear a lot more men that get the term thrown around at them than women. But anyway, this actually brings me to what I wanted to bring up, which is something that has pissed me off for a while when we're discussing this whole idea of feminism, which is that you have to be pro-choice or pro-abortion in order to as a core fundamental position on feminism, when that's not true whatsoever, because the whole idea of feminism, which again, why I don't know why people bother fighting over it these days, the whole idea of it is just for female equality, right? That's all it is. So when they're trying to say that as if you have to be pro-choice in order of it, well then please explain to me why there are so many women that still fall on the pro-life side of everything. And I have got polls. This one here is from Pew Research, and I've also got a Gallup poll as well. So as we kind of take a quick look through here, it talks about views on abortion by gender 2017. Men and women express similar views on abortion. 59% of women say it should be legal in all or most cases, as do 55% of men. So as we can see here, 59 to 38, so pretty much a 60-40, which is not a huge disparagement. When you're talking about 40% pretty much of the female population, because they're so pro-life, it's a little hard to claim then that this is a woman's issue, that it's you have to be a good feminist calls herself pro-choice. Because then if by that claim you're saying the other 40% of women don't want equality. I mean, if this was true, like, let's take something that's more obvious. Let's just say right now, for the sake of argument, there was a bill or a motion, doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be, but let's just say for the sake of argument, it's a bill. Somebody puts forward trying to get the vote taken away from women. So that way, if you're a woman, you can't vote in any sort of election, municipal, provincial, or federal. If that was the case, you could see bipartisan support against that bill that is put in place. You could see that women, whether it was liberal, conservative, left wing, right wing, more or less would come together to say, fuck you. And you would have like a 95% support against the bill. That would be considered a woman's rights issue. But when you have such a small disparagement and such a large section of the population, even if it is more on the minority that considers itself pro-life, even if that is the situation, then you can't really claim that it is a woman's right, that being pro-abortion is a woman's right issue, which is something someone like Justin Trudeau is constantly talking about, how the conservatives are against women's rights. Well, careful, buddy. You've got a lot of female MPs sitting on the other side, so he is calling them all those female conservative MPs, he's saying that they are against women's rights. How ridiculous is that? Like, these women are actually fighting against their own interest? Like, they've been so, brainwashed by men that they're going to fight against their own interest? It's absolutely ridiculous. And what I like about the Gallup poll that we're about to check out is it really speaks, I think, more to the real views when it comes to abortion. Because as we look here, we've got 3. The gray one is number of people who think it should be illegal in all circumstances. Then we got a light green one, which is legal under any circumstances. And then this dark green one here, which is legal only under certain circumstances, and that's a bigger disparagement right here. We got 18% for saying for pro-life. We've got the 29% pro-abortion, but then this 50% here has to do with people who say, yeah, you should have the ability to do it, but it should really only be under certain circumstances. Let's just not make it a general thing where you could just go have an abortion for you, like Oprah's handing them out. You get an abortion, and you get an abortion, and you get an abortion. Because that's kind of the way it is right now. Because when we talk about abortions, right now, it's about, when we're talking in America, it's something, and it's similar numbers in Canada, it's about a third to a quarter of every pregnancy ends in abortion. We're talking about, out of almost 400,000 pregnancies a year, like 100,000 of them end in abortion. And I know the 100,000 abortions per year is actually the number for Canada. And it's something about 375,000 pregnancies in Canada each year, I believe, is what the number is right now. Last time I checked it out, I'm trying to remember my numbers exactly, but I do know that it's about 100,000 abortions each year performed in Canada. That is a startling number, and to me, that is when abortion has gotten out of hand. When a third to a quarter of every pregnancy ends in abortion, how fucked up is that? And then we also, when they're talking about this, when they're just kind of talking general population, they talk about in 2018 how it's actually a 48 to 48, with, I guess, probably about a 2% margin of error. So it's hard to say, but this whole idea that you have to be pro-abortion under every circumstances to consider yourself a good feminist is just stupid, in my opinion. Absolutely ridiculous. And I'm just really tired of that becoming the talking point that so many people are using these days. I just don't have any more time for it. But I think that's all I really had for you all today. Before I go, I think I'm going to quickly check out I haven't really paid attention to the chat at all. And who do we have? Concan. Concan's in the chat? How you doing? Bold like a leopard. Yeah, we got a lot of you. Yeah, sorry, I've been kind of a little distracted. I didn't get a chance to sort of check out the chat. I like that. Concan, I call people fatty all the time. I'm sorry, I'm an asshole. Don't worry, even if you are considered an asshole, I like you, Concan. And I also got bold like a leopard here. Made the light. Yeah, right. When have we ever made light of people's weight? He's making reference to that because we did a stream like less than a week ago on somebody where we were completely making fun of a guy who was just being a little ridiculous, and his weight was one of the big things that we were talking about. Oh, that's funny. And Concan, abortion should be the last resort. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel on the whole situation. I mean, it's just the idea that it's just now used as a form of birth control. It really concerns me, you know. Just it shouldn't be. It's like, and the one thing I still remember, which about I think it was Steven Crowder who said it, which I have mixed feelings on Steven Crowder, but he one time I remember he mentioned in his stream how he works for like a women's crisis shelter, and so does his wife. And he talked about how a number of women that would come in who would be talking about getting abortion, they were aware of the contraceptives that were out there, but didn't end up using. And that goes for both parties, of course, that neither side used the contraceptives. And that's kind of saying a lot. That it's kind of saying a lot when you know that that having sex is going to lead to pregnancy, yet you're not going to take the precautions to do it. Absolutely ridiculous. It should never be publicly funded. Yep, I'm with you on that. Publicly funding just allows it to be manipulated like that. And that was one of my big arguments too with a lot of people when the election was going down in my province, is that people were talking about how Doug Ford wanted to take away abortion rights from women, when all he said on the subject was the fact that he didn't want an underage girl about 16 being able to go have an abortion, and that her parents wouldn't know about it. It's and a lot of people were spinning that, says he wants to take abortion rights away from women. It was absolutely ridiculous. That was not what he said at all. And I stand by what he said on the subject, which is if a young like 16-year-old girl needs to have a parental permission slip to go on a field trip, then shouldn't she have the same shouldn't she need the same approval in order to go get an abortion? Or at the very least, they got to let her parents know. I mean, some bad things can happen because of an abortion like that. If something goes wrong in the abortion, you know. And I don't think it's going to be something that most young girls are going to run off, like teenage girls are going to run off and tell their parents that they did. It's like they're going to come strutting home. It's like, what did you do today, honey? Got an abortion. It's not something that they do. It's something that is supposed to be, I understand, like, people want it to be kept private or feel some shame about it. But there's reasons that right now we leave the age of adulthood up to 18, and while they're underage, they need that parental permission in order to go do something like that. Well, I think that was all I really had for you guys today. Just a few things I wanted to address, kind of was getting grating on my mind throughout the day, so I decided to just hop on a stream and do it about it. Well, thank you all for tuning in. And I hope to be back on here within the next few days. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion.